What was the messaging that was pounded into our brains for years, right? Through the 80s, through the 90s, through the 2000s of like that, diet culture and, being super skinny and restricting food and ignore how you're feeling, ignore that your natural body's rhythms or sleep needs or, all of that stuff, no pain, no gain type of thing. And then how that plays into how our bodies respond now. And it's a very different thing to start to lean into what your body naturally does, how you feel, and to work with that versus fight against it and fight against your body's natural, I don't want to say urges, but the natural rhythm that you go through all the time.
We believe that you are strong by design, and you were made in God's image to have a strong body, mind, and spirit. You're listening to the #1 strength and health authority podcast in the world. So let's get ready to unlock your potential and transform your life in today's episode.
Hi, and welcome to the Strong by Design podcast channel. I'm your host today, Coach Tanya, and joining me is the fabulous Dr. Beth Westie. Welcome, Dr. Beth.
Yay! Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I'm glad we had a little bit of technical issues getting going. I couldn't hear you or you couldn't hear me, but I'm so glad we got that sorted because this is our second attempt at having this podcast recorded. So here we go, and I'm excited. Yeah, before we get going, I just want to share with our listeners a little bit about you. You are the author of the best-selling book, The Female Fat Solution and Female Menopause Solution. You've also created the 12-week Female Hormone Solution Program, and you're the host of your own podcast, the Female Health Solution Podcast, which, by the way, you want to check out. It's absolutely fabulous. Dr. Beth has made it her mission to change the way women view their health. She travels the country to educate and empower women to take their health into their own hands, and you use nutrition to help women work with the natural cycle of their bodies to achieve lasting weight loss and wellness results. We're really excited to discuss this because this is a topic that never gets old. It's conversations at coffee hours, lunchtime at work. These are conversations that women are still having and issues that they're still struggling with. Now, we know a lot more. I mean, every year, every 10 years, every 20 years, we learn and know so much more. We become more educated and more knowledgeable about resources and things that are available to us. But this is a topic that just never seems to go away and seems to be something that women continuously struggle with. So very excited to have you here today because we're going to be talking about eating for your hormone cycle and how to cycle sync to get the results you want. So I want to dive right into that because when I read that, when we were discussing topics, hormone cycle isn't something I hear a lot about from a lot of people, and particularly cycle sync. So I think this is something that's more cutting edge or new, hasn't maybe been, isn't as common or known to many women. So let's jump right in. Welcome.
Yes, I love this. And what my favorite thing about talking about all of this stuff is people are normally like, I've never heard of this before. This sounds really interesting. And once we start talking about it and get into the explanation, everybody's like, oh my gosh, that makes so much sense. Why aren't we doing that already? And I'm like, I know. So when we talk about cycle syncing your food and everything, it's a lot of the background and base of it actually comes from Eastern medicine. So these are ways and methods of eating and fueling the female body that are used in different parts of the world and have been used for hundreds, if not thousands of years. It's very similar to, taking like seed cycling, which is alternating seeds, how you would eat, throughout the month for someone who has a cycle, and expanding that to all the other food and nutrient that you take in. So that's kind of the basic, simple explanation of, your system is different throughout the month and your body responds different, especially, hormonally. So why wouldn't we kind of lean into those differences? They're not bad. One isn't good or bad, right? Versus the other. It's just, your system is different. Your hormones are different. So we can acclimate to that using our nutrition to help our system and help it align as best as we can overall. So if that kind of makes sense.
Okay, so still going with that, I have a question that I think after hearing the first bit, our list, I'm thinking, or I'm going to make a grand assumption here that women like myself in, the 45 plus.
Yeah.
When you talk about hormone cycles, okay, we know there's a change that happens late fall, it can happen as early as in the 30s, but kind of typically if there's been no other extreme instances, we're looking at some like in the 50s, late 40s, early 50s, where women become like perimenopausal, going into that transition of menopause that, can take us an amount of time. So when you talk about hormone cycle and cycle syncing, how can women who are no longer having their cycle, how do we know how to cycle sync?
Yeah.
Now, I want you to talk about that because then ladies, get your pens out, get your paper out and take notes because it's not that difficult. It's not that difficult.
Yeah. So when we look at, and this can apply to some women who have had even a hysterectomy, if they are, for gals that are, let's say in their late 30s or 40s, maybe they're on a birth control and they're like, I don't get a period. I haven't gotten a period in years. I don't know where I'm at. Or I've had a hysterectomy, so I don't have one. I still have my ovaries. What do I do? You can still track your basal body temperature and shift and change things there. Mm-hmm. That's still an option, absolutely. And then the other thing when we're looking at cycle syncing and really aligning, one of the biggest things to realize is just kind of, go with what your hormones are doing, basal body temperature. But some people actually align with the moon and just say, I'm going to pick this or that, right? It's 2 weeks and 2 weeks. That's kind of how I break it down. Days 1 through 14, days 15 through 28, just to keep it really simple and getting started. Days 1 through 14, right? That follicular phase, that's where estrogen is more prevalent. Your system is focused on different things. It can have easier muscle repair. Your digestive system is working differently and better. You can actually burn carbs or utilize carbs better for energy at that point. And a lot of people will notice like, oh yeah, I definitely have more energy. I have less brain fog. I, recover from workouts better. Yeah, totally. And so you can lean into different nutrients at that point too. This is also the time where your natural basal body temperature is lower. So in Eastern medicine, we actually want to align with that and eat foods that have a cooling tone to them. Okay. So chicken, turkey, fish, more raw fruits and veggies, seasonings, rosemary, thyme, mint, adding peppermint to things, putting spearmint leaves in your water, just simple things like that. Cucumber mint water. Little things like that make a big difference in that phase. And then switching over, starting on day 15, 15 through 28, your basal body temperature should elevate and be higher and stay higher that whole time. That's the luteal phase. Progesterone should be more elevated. And your body has just a very different focus at this time too. Digestive system is a little bit slower. It's not bad. It just wants to process things more carefully because you need more nutrients at this time. Need more proteins, need more minerals. And the enzymes and things that are released in the gut are just a little bit different. So sometimes people will notice, gosh, I feel more bloated. Or if you're trying to eat all those cooling foods at that time, oh yeah, I love salad. So you have this big salad and you're like, oh, why does this make my gut hurt? What's wrong? It's just too much raw cooling foods for the slower gut process that you have. So then adding warming foods at that time can be really helpful. We want to encourage that higher basal body temperature and keep that going. Warming foods, different spices, peppers, right? You can put hot sauce on stuff, cinnamon, ginger, lots of warming things to help with that whole process at that time. Yeah.
Okay. So just to clarify that for the listeners, spicy foods when versus cooling foods when? And just in case they didn't get that, let's just one more time.
Yeah. So days 1 through 14,
right?
Spicy. Days 1 through 14 is the cooling, not spicy, right? And I don't want to call it bland.
Right.
But some people will describe it as like, oh, this is kind of boring. It's
well, and part of that with that whole change, and your taste changed too. And I've that's something I've noticed is because someone that for most of my life rarely ever added salt to anything. I was so sensitive to salt. Like I would notice the slightest bit of salt that I would use it cooking because that tempers it a bit, but I never ever added salt. And now it's like I need it. Like I'm like, my body actually craves the salt.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. And that's because during that 15 through 28 timeframe, you need that. You need more protein, more healthy fats, more minerals, all of that stuff. And that goes along with that spicier food time, days 15 through 28. So a lot of the symptoms that women will have, PMS wise, I have cravings, I want salt, I want chips, I want pickles and all those things. Yeah, of course you do. You need those minerals in weeks 3 and 4 leading up to when your period would start. It makes a huge difference then in just how you feel because of how aligned you are with your food and what your hormones are naturally doing in your system versus so many people fight that process for themselves. Do you know what I mean? Like, I should eat the same every day of the month. I got to eat the same meal plan. If I step outside this little window of what I should be eating, that's bad. And I'm like, no, you live in a different body each week throughout the month.
Literally, it's not just the brain, the whole being changes.
Yeah.
It's funny because, or not funny, I don't want anybody to take offense to that, but as I've gotten older, and again, multiple conversations with women, like from their 30s into their 60s. And one of the things I like to stress, or one of the things I like to bring into the conversation is this embracing, like just accepting with some humor. You have to have some humor in all of this. But as you go through, women, we go through puberty where we start to get a period. And then, there's the childbearing years and there's all of that happens with that. And then there's the after of that. And then we get, premenopause and menopause. So we have all these kind of milestones in our life. And I like to, on a more, I guess, sort of emotional level with women is like, just, when we learn to kind of accept and embrace that, okay, my body's different. It needs different things at different times. It's reacting differently. Having, that second glass of red wine in the evening, actually, I can't sleep as well at night. I get night sweats, or I get restless leg syndrome. When we get to a place of peace, that we go, okay, it's different, and these are some changes I have to make. It doesn't mean I have to give up the red wine. It doesn't mean I have to give up the things I like, but paying attention to your biofeedback, because this system is one of the most incredibly intelligent systems we ever will deal with, but that's the one we probably ignore the most. And when we can sort of settle into that and go, okay, the transition actually becomes, I'm not going to say easier, because menopause, especially navigating that can be a bit of a roller coaster. But when we willingly accept that these changes are happening and we pay attention to what our body's telling us and we work with that, that navigation system goes from this to this. Yeah. Would you agree? Would you disagree? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, 100%, 100%. And I feel like part of this too is, to bring in the conversation a little bit of how we were all raised, right? Like, what was the messaging that was pounded into our brains for years, right? Through the 80s, through the 90s, through the 2000s of like that, diet culture and, being super skinny and restricting food and ignore how you're feeling. Ignore that your natural body's rhythms or sleep needs or, all of that stuff, no pain, no gain type of thing. And then how that plays into how our bodies respond now. And it's a very different thing to start to lean into what your body naturally does, how you feel, and to work with that versus fight against it and fight against your body's natural, I don't want to say urges, but the natural rhythm that you go through all the time. Yeah.
Right. Because there's a rhythm and rhythms change. It's like if you go, this is good. Really, this is what popped into my head and I'm thinking, don't say it out loud, but I'm going to say it out loud. I'm an Aquarius odd. But, if you think of like just even going out somewhere to a club or a dance, like the music's always changing. 1 minute you're dancing really fast, next minute it might be slow, next minute somebody might be doing limbo. Like it changes, and our body doesn't change quite that dramatically, but there's a natural rhythm. If you find the rhythm and work with it, it's easier to navigate, but I think it's also easier to be aware of when something isn't working or is working or changes, because when you become friends with your body again and listen to it, there's kind of this relationship, right? That the body is like, okay, this is what's going on, and I'm going to do my best to communicate with you. This is what's happening by giving signals of, I like this, I don't like this, I'm craving this. This is absolutely out of the question, or we need to, like pull on the reins a little bit. It might take for somebody, depending on their upbringing and their diet culture, as you say, what their relationship is and has been with food and nutrition. Yeah. That can be, again, it can feel very overwhelming, because it can be like, I don't even know what this means. So for women that might be in, whether it's, pre or perimenopause or they're menopausal, and they find themselves in this shift, and their understanding of maybe diet and nutrition and how to use that to optimize their best health through this stage. What are a couple really first things that they can do? Like, you can't, it's like somebody that wants to lose weight, somebody that's really motivated. The worst thing they can do is come home and throw all of the food out. That's the absolute worst thing they can do. Usually I like to say, well, let's start with what's one thing that really you're not that great at. And it might be, I barely drink water. Well, let's start with that. Let's do 10 days of so many glasses of water. And when you get to the end of that, let's add another thing or add in more water. So for women that find themselves just, what are a couple easy first starts for them?
Yeah. So some of my favorite things are, just start with at least one meal a day where you are toning it more cooling or warming. And these are foods that you eat already, right? This is not restrictive. This is not exclusive to anything. For example, I like to do a protein shake in the morning. It's just fast and easy. I've got kids. I have to get them out the door, all the things, right? So one of my first meals is a protein shake. And so I love, chocolate flavor. So in my cooling phase, I will do chocolate and add some peppermint to it. Just like a drop or two, just a little bit. There you go. Like, I'm getting all the same things, but I'm toning it cooling. Yeah. And then for warming, I switch to cinnamon.
Nice.
It's just that easy. Like I said, I've got kids. So as a family, we have family dinners, all the time, and things like tacos, right? Everybody loves tacos, but I will make sure we have chicken tacos, and I will not add spice to mine when I'm in the cooling phase. But when I'm in the warming phase, beef or venison, and then I will add all the peppers, all the spices, as much as I can handle. And so just little ways, like start with one meal a day, start with layering that in. Again, you can flavor your waters this way. And even after a month or two of doing this, a lot of women notice, wow, I really do crave more spicy things during this time. And I'm like, perfect. That's exactly what we're going for.
Now the system and the engineer are working together. So right?
I like that.
So
the system
again,
and engineer.
Going back to cycles, and for women that are no longer having a cycle, you talked about basal body temperature, but some women who don't, are like, I'm not going to track that. What are some other indications that women? I mean, I'm a big fan of, because I like to write things, so I'm a big fan of writing things down, because that's how I can go back, and because I got so much going on, how, I forget, like by tomorrow, I'll forget what I had for breakfast today. So I like to write down, like when I notice myself, my body changing, I started just writing things down, like when my sleep was being disrupted, what I ate the night before, that kind of stuff. So besides basal temperature, what are some really easy sort of signals? Because the body, it doesn't always make it really difficult for us. I mean, if we fight it, it becomes difficult because we're resisting. But the body actually is really trying to work with us at our level. So what are some of the other signs, symptoms, clues that women can pay attention to and go, oh, okay, so things are changing? What are some of those that they can acknowledge?
Yeah. So one of the other things is like cervical mucus can change. Energy levels change, sleep quality can change, and you can kind of align with that. For women who are like full menopause, they're like, nope, I haven't had a cycle in years and years. That's not part of it. One of the biggest things to recognize is that the body then is so hormonally different because your estrogen and progesterone levels are just a lot lower. They're not gone, really, right? But it's just a lot lower. But you can still take advantage of cycle syncing your foods because then you're really kind of playing with your metabolism. One of the things that the female body's so good at is acclimating. It's going to acclimate. Oh, you're going to change up your workouts, right? And this goes along with the same thing where people say don't do the same workout every day because your body will acclimate to it and it won't be as effective. That's its job, right? So if you're eating the same thing and the same things every day, all the time, your body's going to acclimate and not utilize those nutrients as best as it can. Whereas if you're switching and using the tone of the food, the warming and the cooling can be a great way to do this. That helps metabolically overall. And then also noting that the menopausal body, there's a few specific things with this. The digestive system changes a lot, so you're not uploading the same amount of nutrients. So it takes more protein to do the same job protein used to do before menopause. Not because you're doing anything wrong, but just because it takes more protein to upload. So if you were eating, I was eating 20 grams protein for breakfast, you will need 25 or 30 grams of protein for breakfast for it to do the same thing that protein used to do. That's a big one. And then minerals and nutrients are also a big one. And then the other thing with menopause is carbohydrates. Really
and
getting a blend.
We tend to fear carbohydrates. Like there's this whole culture of like no carbs, no carbs, no carbs.
Yeah. Yeah. You still need carbohydrate, but really focusing on a solid blend of simple and complex carbs. Because if we are only getting one or the other, it can actually impact how your body processes carbs. And again, this is for the female body, the menopausal body, the enzymes in your gut change so that you have, I don't want to say harder time processing carbs, but that's why it's so important to get that blend. And if you cut out carbs, so for anybody who has done no carb, I went no carb for 2 months and I lost a bunch of weight, but then I ate carbs again and I gained it back. And it's like, and now my stomach isn't the same. Yeah, because your body loses the ability to process those carbs through the enzymes that you naturally create. You have to reteach your system how to do that and support that digestion completely differently, which again, for the menopausal body then is a whole different journey to go through.
Right. Right. And we don't want to make things any more, difficult than they are. But I think sometimes, a lot of times as women, I think sometimes we can make it a little harder for ourselves. Just typically women, this is not excluding men, but we're talking about women today. So we're going to talk about women. Typically women, we spend the majority of our lives taking care of everybody else. We are so, you could ask us any question about anyone in our family, our neighbors, our coworkers, their health, or like, I know why she's not feeling well. She's been eating mac and cheese the last 6 days. Like we can really, like, we're so alert to everybody else that we rarely put that kind of thought and time into ourselves. And then all of a sudden we're in this place where it's like, who, like from the neck down, who is this? And I don't know what to do with this thing that's attached to me, and we can make it a little difficult. So I think part of this, all of this falls under not just in terms of health and wellness, but also self-care, like paying attention to what we need. And I often will talk with women who've, scheduled consults with me and said, you've given so much. Now you're at this, especially the women that are like really, because some women get very emotionally upset about the fact that they're in menopause. It's not because they want to have more children or anything, but they kind of view it as like this tragic end to something. This not necessarily a tragic end to their life, but like a tragic end to like vitality and free, like stuff. And I'm like, wait a second, let's just give that a 2-degree shift. Just a second. And if you could view this as now you have the opportunity that now you have time. Kids have likely left home or they don't need you the same. That's not always the case, but typically women are in a place of they may be empty nesters, or all of a sudden they have a lot more time where they're not needed the same way.
Yeah.
So I'm like, this is your gift. That's why when everything works well and there's no other like medical issues or anything like that, that menopause happens at this phase of your life because, if things work the way, whatever normal is or how things are meant to go, we don't typically have a lot of little ones running around. We've got time to actually pay attention to ourselves and focus on self-care of ourselves. And when I can get them on board with that thinking, it's like, oh, it's really not a tragic end. It's just kind of a different beginning.
Yeah. Yes. 100%. Yes. It's just a different way to focus on the body. And you're absolutely right. Having that time to dedicate to yourself is what your system needs. And you have to figure out how to live in the new meat suit that you run around in.
Exactly. And it can, and it's actually, with a few of the clients that I've worked with that have kind of they've gone through the peri and pre, and they're kind of in the mid of menopause. They're actually like, it's so awesome to see them doing things like one lady, she's always wanted to learn, like she's always wanted to take painting classes. So now she's doing painting. Like she's doing things, they're doing things that they always put on hold because they had a family to raise or they were obligated elsewhere. They were working, they were on committees, they were so spread thin taking care of everybody else that all like their little wish list of things they wanted to do, they put it on hold. And now they're like, oh, I'm going to take that dance class. Oh, I'm going to read these, the list of books that I've had for the last 10 years. I'm going to start reading those, or I'm going to, start like a little side hustle. And it's really, really wonderful to see that because, and as maybe fluffy as it may sound, those clients or those women who are friends, those women that I see embracing like that kind of joy back into their lives, it makes a massive difference in, again, this navigation of what's happening. And, they seem to find a peace in it and a freedom where they're more aware of what's happening. They're aware of the triggers. They're aware of the foods. They're aware of the exercise. And they just seem to find that rhythm a little, they're not fighting it as much.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Because I do feel like there is that time frame where having families, it gets so busy, you push your own self, your own health, everything on the back burner, right? And usually women will not pay attention to their own issues unless it stops them in their tracks, right? Yeah. Oh, I've got a headache, but I can still press on. Here I go. Oh, this is a problem. Oh, I have diarrhea today, but I've got a schedule to keep to, so I'll just
gonna do that 12-hour drive.
Woo!
Yay.
Right? Yeah. Yeah. And so we're so used to putting ourselves in the back burner where, again, making ourselves the forefront. There are some women I feel like they feel it's selfish almost.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Women struggle with that.
Yeah. Oh. Yeah. Oh, what do you mean I have to dedicate this time? This is a lot of time. This is a lot of time every day to focus on me. And I'm like, yeah, it's not, because you've been spending 3 times the amount of time focusing on everybody else. Right. You're getting a fraction of that now, and it feels like too much.
Right. No, but it's true. It's self-care, and self-care is often viewed as being selfish. Like taking time from whatever to take some time to, do morning devotions or do some reading or go for a walk, things like that. So I can't do that because I have to, I've got new neighbors moved in. So I've got to make like 6 weeks of meals for them because it's like, no, you don't have to. Stop distracting yourself from what you're not, from the things that are like really bothering you here. And let's focus on that. Let's spend some time on that. And after a couple of weeks, you might be like, oh, well, now you have time to maybe make them some muffins or something, or go over and have a cup of coffee. But stop rerouting around this and then coming back to, I feel terrible. I can't sleep. My husband doesn't even recognize the person I am anymore. I feel like I'm crazy. I can't lose weight. Where you just kind of dig that hole further and further. You get into that cycle, that can be really hard to pull somebody out of.
Yeah.
Emotionally.
Yeah. It really can. It really, really can. And the other thing too is that it does show up in your other relationships.
Yeah.
Like it does. It absolutely does. How you act as a partner, as a, mom, as a coworker, everything. And that's one of my favorite things that women go through, seeing that transition in them and, getting messages back of like, my marriage is way better than it's been in 10 years. And I'm like, yeah, because you feel
I'm happier. You got to like yourself, because if you don't like yourself, it's really hard to find other people who like you.
Yes.
Like, it's just true.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So it's this huge transition. But again, it comes with taking the time to dedicate to you first.
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah. So I'm going to bring up the topic that I know there's listeners are probably waiting to hear, because lots of us, we're humans, we like the quick fix. So we can get into a pattern of behavior or habit where, okay, we're working with somebody, we're going to try it for like a week or two, but haven't really noticed much change. So now I want the pill, or I want the surgery, or I want the patch, or I want the HRT. Now, not discounting or saying HRT is bad. I think that, I think Western medicine definitely has a place, and there's a time and place to bring it in. I don't know that it needs to be the first go-to for everybody. Now, everybody's situation is different. Yeah. So we can't speak to to all women as whether it's good or bad, but it is an option. So in your opinion, where or how does HRT have its place and can be helpful? Like, at what point would you be sitting across from a woman going, we're going to keep doing these things because these are important, like the foods and the cycling of food and our exercise, like all these things that we're working on holistically at home and the self-care. At what point does the conversation become relevant to where you say, okay, this is where now, a conversation with your primary might help, because HRT or some kind of hormone therapy could help us here?
Yeah. This is such a great question. And something I get from a lot of people every day, and messages on social media and stuff. Here's when people are only presented with some type of hormone therapy as a solution to any type of symptom they're having, not everybody gets a great result, right? So what I see clinically is people who have issues that actually stem from adrenal issues or chronic stress. Then that chronic stress spills over to the hormone area, and they'll get, oh my gosh, my hot flashes and all these other things are terrible. Well, yeah, you've been under a lot of stress and it's gotten worse in the last 6 months. So of course, those symptoms are worse.
Cortisol is through the roof.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. And if you're not doing anything to address the adrenals or anything else, then just throwing some HRT on it actually makes a lot of those symptoms worse and makes people feel worse. Like this is such a problem, or this happened and I tried this and it really didn't work for me. Yeah, because you were throwing something at it that wasn't the origin of the issue. It was really the stress response your body has that was not being addressed.
Right.
So that's the biggest thing, is that if there is a way to work with the body, find out, okay, this is the issue, then it's a game changer, right? But there are some women who are like, oh my gosh, going on this hormone therapy was brilliant. Mm-hmm. And it was super, super helpful. Fantastic. As long as there is I want to say more long-term plan for it. Sometimes women are like, yeah, I got put on this, but I don't know how long I'm supposed to be on it, or I don't know, what the long-term goal is. And the philosophy, behind everything that I think about is really, again, stems from an Eastern medicine side point of, the body is made to go through these different phases in life. The female body was not made to have these elevated levels of hormone its entire lifespan. So at some point, your system should get used to having those lower levels of estrogen and progesterone and to function well with those lower levels. So however we can assist the system to do that is going to be beneficial most long term. Because, you shouldn't need to be like 100 years old and have a bunch of hormone therapy. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, there needs to be I like how you said, like, the long-term plan. Because really, when we, again, pulling back into that awareness. What's the body telling you? Some self-care and small adjustments.
Yes.
That are actually really simple to implement. Like, so you're doing the morning shake anyway. So for 1 to 14 days, you're doing chocolate and something. And then the next you're doing chocolate with something else. That's a really easy transition. That's a really easy adjustment in everyday life. And I think, again, I agree with you. It's really important to have, like, address things at the foundation. Like, what's causing this? Like, why is this happening? And what can I do with diet, nutrition, exercise, and just lifestyle choices to make a massive, make a big impact to feeling better. And then at that point, when hormone therapy is needed, it's a lot different than just, I don't feel well. Oh, you're in menopause. Here's some HRT.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of steps that you can go through before you get to that point.
Right.
Right. Yeah.
And again, it's like as we're talking about this, there is like the bell curve of where menopause typically starts for women, but it can start early, like women that have, had cancer and chemo, have had hysterectomies early are just thrown into this. And that, so that's almost a whole other conversation in some ways, because that is like, yesterday they were this, and then this morning it's like going 100 miles an hour and hitting a brick wall.
Yep.
Big change. Now, for those of us that haven't had that, we do have the advantage of being able to, over the course of a fairly long period of time, the body telling us, and not everything at once, but like all of a sudden, like I noticed when it was like, oh, some of these foods that I used to love and be able to kind of have seconds or have a little more, I feel like crap when I eat them, so I'm just not going to do that, but it wasn't that, and there are like a million other things. It was slowly just recognizing how I was responding to different things I was doing in my life. And I had time to acclimate and make changes and find out what worked better and go with that. And it's a much nicer ride when you can do that. There's still bumps, and once in a while you kind of, there's potholes or you hit the ditch, but it's a nicer ride overall.
Yes. 100%. It's a much better way to go about it than, and it is really hard again. And the hard thing is that with a lot of this stuff, it doesn't apply to every single person out there. Right.
Right.
So when we speak about a lot of this, I want to say the generalities. And for a lot of people, this can be helpful to go down the route of, if you think you have hormonal issues, you're in perimenopause or in menopause and you're having symptoms, what should I do first? I am always a person who wants to come from a, conservative standpoint to help with things. Work on your gut health. Work on your nutrition. Make sure you're getting lots of exercise and sunshine and all of those basic things first to see, because the body can have massive changes off of those few very simple foundational things. Right. Then your body just works better on its own. Right. Versus jumping to the next thing and the next thing, or expecting yourself to put up with, I've always eaten like this. Like you were just saying. You were just saying like, my body doesn't love it when I eat too much of this now. Yep. It's totally different. Well, it used to do this, so I got to force it to try and do it again more.
Right. Stop fighting against your body and work with it. It's going to be better. Yes. We're not saying you're going to love the whole thing, but it's going to be a lot better. You're going to like it more than hate it.
Yes.
It's very easy to hate it by putting yourself in a position where you just completely resist everything. Because as much as, I don't know that I'd want to be 20 or 30 again. I've actually loved every era of my life, and it just seems to get better because I think, and I hope, I'm becoming wiser. I'm becoming more patient, a lot more grounded, less, it's been a great ride. It's been a really great ride, but I didn't stop long enough to fight it. I would stop and be like, that's different. Yeah. Okay, let's address it. But that, I was also raised in a household where nutrition and food was my mother was a stay-at-home mom, so we always had home-cooked meals, and our lunches were the leftovers. And, I grew up with a pretty good relationship with food, and knowing early on some things that, I could never eat green apples. Loved them, but one bite of a green apple and my mouth would just be full of canker sores. So I was always aware of how certain thing and just, I'm not going to do that again, so our bodies are really amazing. And I like to remind women of that. They are amazing. I mean, we grow human beings. Grow human beings. That's phenomenal. That's a big, big thing. So, you got to be nice to this meat suit that, like you said, you have to really it's time to honor it and be like, okay, you were really good to me. I put a lot of stress on you. I did some crazy things, had babies, did all the stuff. And now you need some rest, and you need things to slow down a little bit. So I'm going to give you that.
Yes. Yeah. And moving through the phases of life, because women go through phases of life very differently than males do, right? There's, in my book, The Female Fat Solution, I have a whole section called The 7 Bodies of Eve. Ooh, because we go through so many different bodies in our lifetime. And the way the female body is talked about, like in the media and, all this stuff that you should have the same body or fit into the same clothes that you did in high school. When you were a literal child, that's, you know what I mean? That's not the same. Structurally, you don't have the same body. You move into a different body in these different phases of life. Lean into that and work with that new body. We just have to become acquainted again with what body we live in. So,
exactly. Yeah. Well, this has been an awesome conversation. I want to have you back because there's so much more to talk about. I actually want to come. I want to have you back and I want to talk about the 7 Bodies of Eve. I think that's going to be a great conversation. So we're going to do that. But thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to be on the show. It's been such a pleasure to talk with you. Now, we're going to include all of the how to get in touch with you on in the show notes. So make sure if you're listening, check the show notes. But right here, right now, Dr. Beth, where can people find you? What's the easiest way if someone's listening to this and goes, I need to talk to her? What's the best way for them to reach out to you?
Yeah. Email is the fastest way, which is just beth@drbethwestie.com if you've got a direct question. Otherwise, I am most active on the social medias on Instagram. But I'm also on Facebook and YouTube, TikTok, all the things.
All the things.
All the things.
Great. Well, again, thank you so much. I look forward to a future chat. And to those of you listening today, thank you so much for joining us. Remember to give us a 5-star review and please share the show, share the channel with friends and family. We love sharing the information, sharing our guests with all of you. I'm Coach Tanya. Thank you for joining me and we will talk soon. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much for listening to the Strong by Design podcast. If you found value in today's episode, please subscribe so that more people can find out about our show. Plus, you don't want to miss any future episodes with the amazing guests and topics we have lined up for you.